Zoe placed the folder with the reports on the desk, put on her coat and left the office. Today had been a tough day for her. All she wanted was to go home, make herself a hot tea with lemon and wrap herself in a soft blanket. As she ran home, the drizzling rain and cold wind made her feel freezing. Upon seeing that all the lights were on in her apartment windows, Zoe immediately shivered and stopped. She realized that her husband was drunk. As she approached the apartment building, her suspicions were confirmed. From open windows, she heard loud music and her husband swearing with himself. The young woman knew that if she went inside now, she would have to listen to him all night. Tony would make a scene as usual, accusing her of all sorts of things. With a heavy sigh, Zoe sat down on a cold, wet bench. She didn't want to cry, but tears rolled down her cheeks like hail. Suddenly, she heard Tony's angry voice. "There you are! Who are we waiting for?" The man leaned out of the window, risking a fall, and kept mumbling more unintelligible curses directed at Zoe. "I'm coming," the woman said in a low voice. "I've just sat down to rest." However, that night the woman never got to rest. Tony yelled at her like a madman until morning, and only at dawn did he fall asleep, snoring at the kitchen table. Glancing at the clock, Zoe realized that there was no time left for sleep. After taking a shower, she had some tea and began cleaning the apartment. With a droopy look and red eyes from crying and lack of sleep, she went to work. As she was getting on the bus, she stumbled and fell into a huge puddle. The entire contents of her purse fell out into the muddy, wet sludge. Looking at her white coat, now stained with black drops, the woman cried in despair. An indifferent crowd of sleepy people rushed onto the bus, ignoring her. Well, don't cry," a man's voice nearby said. "Let me help?" "No need," Zoe sobbed. "Hurry and catch the bus, you'll be late." "I'm not in a hurry anywhere, and I can't leave such a wonderful woman in trouble." The man smiled. "My name's Ben, and you?" "Zoe." The man skillfully lifted Zoe out of the puddle, shook off her coat as best he could, and started picking up the items that had fallen out of her purse. "What should we do next?" Ben asked Zoe with a serious expression. "I don't know," the woman admitted honestly. She realized that she couldn't go to work in her current state, but she also didn't want to go home. Tony was most likely already awake and had started to hangover. His addiction to alcohol was a serious problem, and it seemed incurable. For 3 years, Zoe had been trying to help him overcome his alcoholism, but every day her hope diminished. "Come with me. I'm staying at that hotel across the street. You can stay in the room, get warm, and I'll quickly go to the store and buy you some clean clothes." "No, really, it's not necessary," Zoe objected. "No refusals accepted. If I fell into a puddle, would you leave me in trouble?" "No." "That's right." Zoe couldn't understand what came over her at that moment. Perhaps this kind and cheerful man had caught her attention with his friendly demeanour, or maybe she simply wanted someone to take care of her. "Let's go," the woman said quietly. While Ben went shopping, Zoe took a shower, warmed up and sat down in a comfortable armchair in front of the TV after having a cup of coffee. She didn't fully comprehend what she was doing, since she had work waiting for her, including an urgent report that her strict boss demanded. But she felt cosy in this quiet place, free from the daily hustle and bustle. "I'm back," Ben shouted, trying to squeeze through the narrow doorway with a heavy bag. "Here's a coat, and in this package are pants and warm socks. Try them on. I think I got the sizes right." "Thank you," the woman said, feeling embarrassed. "You didn't have to buy such an expensive coat. A windbreaker would have been enough. But thank you anyway. I'll definitely repay you. And by the way, I ordered a table for our lunch at the restaurant. I just realized that I haven't even had breakfast today. Will you keep me company? I can't eat it all by myself." "Okay," Zoe smiled. In the end, the woman spent the entire day with Ben, He shared stories of his interesting and adventurous life, filled with vibrant emotions and travels to different countries. Ben had a wealth of experiences to talk about. On the other hand, she could only discuss her own dull life, but she chose not to, not wanting to spoil the magic of the day. As evening approached, Zoe realized it was time for her to leave, but she couldn't bring herself to go. "I have to go," the woman said sadly with a smile. "Zoe, I wanted to tell you." The man took Zoe's hand. When she felt his warmth, she forgot everything. The next morning, Zoe and Ben woke up early. The man opened the curtains, letting the sunshine in. "I'm leaving tonight," he said sadly, turning to Zoe lying in his bed. The woman wrinkled her nose at the bright sunlight and let out a sweet yawn. At that moment, she didn't want to think about him leaving tonight, or the fact that this fairy tale would end forever. She was happy in the present moment, and wished time would stand still, leaving just the two of them in the world. "Zoe, I don't know much about your life. You don't tell me, and I don't want to pry. Tell me, are you capable of making impulsive decisions that could change your destiny?" "I don't know." "Will you come with me? You'll never regret it. I don't know what happened to me, but I do know one thing. I don't want to be apart from you, even for a second. I guess that's what love at first sight feels like. Now, I have to attend to some business for a few hours. Will you stay? We can leave together in the evening." "But I need to gather my documents and belongings at least," the woman said, feeling confused. "Okay, tell me the address and I'll pick you up." "No need. I'll come myself," Zoe said softly. "Okay, I'll be waiting." Ben hugged the woman tightly, not wanting to let her go for a second. He didn't know what had enchanted him, but he realized he wanted her by his side always. Zoe walked home, feeling happy for the first time in years. The attention and compliments from men had long been forgotten by the young woman. Tony, her husband, rarely paid her any attention and never complimented her. He was not a bad man when he was sober. After every drinking binge, he would fall into a state of depression and beg for forgiveness from his wife. Things would seem to improve for a while, but before long, another drinking episode would occur, and the cycle would continue. Perhaps Zoe would have left him earlier, but she felt pity for her husband, especially since he had recently lost his parents. She knew that if he were left alone, he would fall through. But now she had an epiphany and realized that the best years of her life were passing by. With courage and determination, she decided to do something different from her. She would gather her documents and necessary belongings and leave with Ben. And whatever happens, perhaps somewhere out there she could find happiness. "Where have you been?" Tony asked in a despondent voice. Sitting on the edge of the bed with his head in his hands. Zoe guessed that most likely he had run out of money because he was completely sober. Ignoring her husband's question, Zoe quickly started packing her things into a travel bag. "Do you have any money?" Tony asked hopefully. "No, I paid the rent 2 days ago," the woman replied mechanically. "Where are you going?" Her husband jumped up alarmed. "I'm going on a business trip," Zoe lied, avoiding eye contact. She couldn't admit that she was leaving him and running away to an unknown destination with a strange man. Tony let out a heavy sigh and laid down on the couch. He tried to sleep, but his pounding headache prevented him from finding any rest. The words of his wife did not immediately reach him, and only after a few minutes did he realize that Zoe had never gone on a business trip. Her position had nothing to do with them. "Zoe, where are you going?" Tony rushed out into the hallway. "I've already told you," she replied. "Don't lie. Are you leaving me?" he asked fearfully. "Please don't go away." "Tony, I'm fed up. I can't live like this anymore. I'm sorry, but we're not happy together. Maybe after I leave, you'll find a woman who can help you become a better man and husband." Zoe lowered her head and sat down on the ottoman. She had hoped to avoid this unpleasant conversation, but she still had to explain herself. Perhaps it was for the best. She would set the record straight. Tears welled up in Tony's eyes as he looked at the woman he loved. He couldn't believe this was happening in reality, not in a dream. He couldn't let Zoe leave because he knew he would be lost without her. "My darling, my love, please don't do anything foolish. I know I've hurt you. I swear I'll never touch alcohol again in my life. We have our whole lives ahead of us. We can be happy. I'm sorry. I couldn't accept the death of my parents, and after that incident, I lost control. It won't happen again. Please don't leave me. I'll die without you." Tony knelt down, hugged his wife's knees, and began kissing her feet. Zoe silently swallowed her tears. She realized that her worst fear had come true. She couldn't leave him in this situation because it would be like passing a death sentence on him. "Get up," she quietly said after a minute. "I'm not leaving." She sat in the kitchen by the window, silently weeping. The thought of Ben waiting for her while she was in her despised apartment made her feel sick. But she couldn't do anything else. She couldn't abandon the man who needed her help and support so desperately. "You rest," Tony whispered. "I'll clean the apartment and then cook us dinner. Tomorrow I'll go to work. I'll work day and night. You won't need anything. I promise you won't regret believing in me. Do you believe?" "I do," Zoe whispered bitterly. Meanwhile, Ben had been standing near the window for 2 hours, looking out for Zoe. His train had left half an hour ago, but he couldn't leave without her. He still had a faint hope that she would come after all. He waited until morning. As soon as dawn broke, he realized that Zoe would never appear in his life again. He let out a heavy sigh, took his suitcase, and headed to the train station. After meeting this extraordinary woman, he was left with a bitter aftertaste. Only now did he truly understand what it meant to be abandoned. He was usually the one who dumped women, not the other way around. Zoe had been trying to forget Ben for a month. At first, she thought it was just a typical romantic affair, but over time she realized that his memory refused to leave her heart. Every day, she regretted more and more how foolishly she had let go of such a wonderful man. Tony kept his promise. He didn't drink for almost a month, although he didn't bring any money home and spent more and more time on the couch complaining of poor health. Once she came home from work, Zoe saw that all the windows in the apartment were brightly lit again. It could only mean one thing. Tony had started drinking again. Zoe realized that she didn't want to step foot inside her own home. Instead, she decided to go to her friend's place. Quietly entering the apartment for her things, she saw Tony sitting in the kitchen, hugging a bottle and cursing to himself. Stealthily, she slipped into the bedroom, grabbed what she needed at this time, and rushed out of the apartment. "Hi," Tricia said, understanding everything without words. "Tricia, I won't go back to him anymore. I can't stand it anymore. Let me stay at your place for a while," Zoe said sadly. "I'm glad you finally came to your senses," Tricia winked. "Take off your jacket and come into the kitchen. I'll feed you and tell you about my grand plans." Zoe and Tricia had been friends for a long time, ever since Zoe was in the orphanage. Zoe couldn't stand up for herself and would often cry in a corner due to constant bullying from the other children. And Tricia, being a couple of years older, immediately took the young girl under her wing. She had always been brave, determined and full of enthusiasm, and even after many years, she hadn't changed a bit. "Well, here's the deal. I decided to start my own business. I have big plans, but I can't do it without your help. You're an excellent accountant, so I'm really counting on you to help me with my finances." "What kind of business are you talking about?" Zoe asked with a smile. "Don't laugh. I believe we can make it work. I want to open a beauty salon to start with. I have experience in this field after all. I've been working as a hairdresser for 5 years, and if it doesn't work out, you'll lose all your money. Are you okay with that possibility?" "I am certain that it will work out, with your help. You have a sharp mind," Tricia insisted. "Okay, then I'll help you with accounting," Zoe agreed. "No, that won't do. I don't want your help. I want you to be a part of it. You'll have to quit your job and join our business." "Are you out of your mind?" Zoe objected. "How am I supposed to support myself?" "Don't worry about that. I have enough money for the first time. You'll live with me. Think about it. What's in store for you at your job? A meagre salary and a full-time job? But here you'll have new prospects. I've already counted everything." "Let's not get too excited. I'll think it over first, then I'll give you an answer." "Good," Tricia said, pleased. "I knew you wouldn't refuse me." In the morning, Zoe felt sick. A headache and nausea suddenly overcame her. Realizing she couldn't work in such a state, she lay back in bed. "Maybe I poisoned myself with something yesterday," suggested the woman. "I've never felt this bad before." "What if you're pregnant?" Tricia suggested. "No, Tony and I haven't been close for a long time," the woman said, then stammered, remembering Ben. "What? Why the strange gaze?" Tricia was losing patience with curiosity. "Are you pregnant, after all?" "I don't know," Zoe admitted. "It's quite possible. I should go to a doctor." Zoe never had any secrets from her best friend, so she told her about Ben, how she fell in love with him at first sight, and how she wanted to leave with him, but couldn't find the courage to leave Tony. "What a fool you are. I have no more words," Tricia said angrily. "You had a chance, most likely the only one in your life. Do you know how to find him?" "No," Zoe said sadly. "I don't even know what city he lives in. We spent the whole day chatting with him. Ben told me a lot of interesting things about his life, but as it turned out, I know absolutely nothing about him, only his name." "Okay, well, we won't get upset ahead of time. If your pregnancy is confirmed, you're going to have the baby. Don't make the mistake I made years ago. I'll help you with everything, but promise me you'll choose me as the godmother for your baby." "I promise." Zoe smiled as she hugged her friend. She felt very comfortable around Tricia. She was more like an older sister than a friend to her. Zoe knew for sure that without Tricia's support, she would have a very hard time in life. The next day, Zoe went to the doctor. Her hunch was confirmed. "Congratulations, you're 5 weeks pregnant," the doctor said with a gentle smile. "Thank you." Zoe was embarrassed for some reason. "Do you know who it's going to be?" "Not yet," laughed the doctor, "but we will see in due time." Zoe left the clinic and realized that an important stage of change had come in her life. She had to let go of fear and start to change something in her gloomy everyday life. Tricia was right. They should take a risk, make every effort to create a business, and change their standard of living. "Well, what did the doctor say?" Tricia asked as soon as Zoe entered the apartment. "I have 2 pieces of news, and both are good," the woman smiled. "Great! Tell me already, don't keep me in suspense." "I'm pregnant. That's the first news. And the second is that I've calculated everything. I think the money you have saved will be enough to start a business." "Hooray!" shouted Tricia, throwing herself around her friend's neck. "And are you going to quit your job?" "Yes. I'll write a letter of resignation tomorrow," promised Zoe. 6 months later, 2 friends were sitting in a small, cozy office. They had succeeded, thanks to Tricia's determination and Zoe's professionalism. Of course, the profit was still meagre, but it was there. And this already gave hope that in the future it would be possible to open a small chain of salons around the city. "I don't even know what I'll be doing without you," Tricia lamented. "But it's not like I'm going on maternity leave forever," Zoe laughed. "I'll definitely be with the baby for a couple of months, and then I'm going to hire a nanny for a few hours a day." "You're right, I was thinking the same thing. I forgot to tell you that I met Tony at the house last night. He was waiting for you and I chased him away, Tricia confessed. You did the right thing, Zoe said with a frown. I think the alcohol is making him crazy. After the last time we talked, I don't even want to hear about him. Is that when he suggested you keep the baby in the maternity hospital? Tricia grinned. How did he even think of such a thing? Yeah, he said, I'll forgive your affair if you give up the baby and forget all about him. You know, he needs a strong woman who can take him by the skin and shake him a couple of times. Maybe then he'd get his brain back in order. He's not a bad man, but he's killing himself, said Tricia. Perhaps you're right, agreed Zoe. Feeling a little sick, Zoe hurried to finish her business and went home early. She had been staying with Tricia until now. Her friend said she could live with her as long as she wanted, even for the rest of her life. Seeing Tony at the entrance, Zoe wanted to turn around and go back, but it was too late. Her ex-husband had already noticed her. Why have you come again? She asked in an angry voice. Zoe, don't chase me away. Listen to me, Tony said softly. If you want to say your idiotic suggestion again, you shouldn't. No, I'm sorry, I was wrong. I agree. Come back home, please. What do you agree? Did I give you any conditions? The woman wondered. I agree to have your child live with our family, the man said, looking hopefully at Zoe. I am not well alone. Have you forgotten what you promised my sick mother? You said you would never leave me. I remember. But you also promised her you'd quit drinking and bring money into the family. I'll quit drinking, I promise, assured Tony. Moreover, I'll never reproach you with another man's child. Tony, stop it. Don't talk nonsense. We've parted once and for all. Leave me alone at last. All right, said the man quietly. Then lend me 100 until payday. I have no money even for bread. Take it, Zoe said, holding out some bills to him. Please, forget the way here. Turning around, she walked quickly into the entranceway. After such encounters, she became unbearably bitter. On the one hand, she felt sorry for Tony, but on the other hand, she realized that this could not go on for long. She could not sacrifice herself and babysit him all her life. Remembering Ben, the woman cried once more. She still couldn't forgive herself for that irreparable mistake. She could have at least said goodbye to him and taken his phone number. Maybe with him she could have found happiness. 3 months later, she sadly stared out of the window, watching the wind pick up large snowflakes, preventing them from reaching the ground. When she saw a man carrying luxurious roses approaching the maternity hospital, she frowned, trying to hold back her tears. No one was coming to her. Happy fathers were bringing bouquets to their wives and writing romantic notes. And one of them had even organized a small celebration under the windows yesterday. He was overjoyed about the birth of his daughter, but no one was happy for her little girl, except for Zoe and Tricia. 2 days ago, Zoe gave birth to a baby girl. It was already evident that Leslie was a spitting image of her father. Holly, your husband is here, Zoe smiled, and he's with the bouquet again. I'll give him a hard time, Holly, a neighbour in the ward, exclaimed. He's already spent so much money on flowers. It's his way of expressing his joy, Zoe explained. You're right. Emile has wanted a daughter for years. We have 3 sons. He said if I gave birth to a girl, he would carry us in his arms for the rest of his life, Holly boasted. He called all our family. He is going to celebrate the birth of our daughter. I don't know how you'll manage alone with your baby. You're so unlucky. You're mistaken, Zoe said angrily. 2 days ago, I became the happiest woman ever. I finally have a purpose in life, and, believe me, not having a man around me doesn't diminish my happiness. Sometimes it's better without men. Not everyone is as caring as your Emile. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to offend you. Holly hurried to apologize. But Zoe didn't take offense. She had long ago accepted her role as a single mother. It was her choice, and she didn't regret it at all. However, frankly speaking, I don't understand why you divorced your husband while being pregnant," Holly added, perplexed. "Holly, let's change the subject. I'm doing very well in my life. I just didn't want to live with my husband. That's it." "But is the child even from your ex-husband?" Holly insisted. "Yes," answered Zoe confidently, who was already tired of the general discussion of her life. So she put on her robe and went for a walk around the ward. The woman wanted to be discharged as soon as possible, to avoid hearing around the clock about how wonderful Holly's husband was and how unfortunate Zoe was. And finally that day came. Zoe was upset when she found out that she and Holly were being discharged on the same day. Emil, Holly's husband, was planning a grand show with a lot of relatives. The thought of leaving the hospital with only Tricia and the baby made Zoe feel sad, but there was nothing she could do. "Zoe, at last!" shouted a happy Tricia, rushing to her friend. "Where's our little Leslie?" "Now the nurse will bring her out and hand her to you. Tradition, so to speak," smiled Zoe. "Listen, who else is being discharged today? Some important person, I suppose. There's a crowd at the entrance with balloons and flowers as well as a photographer. The only thing missing is an orchestra," marvelled Tricia. "It's my roommate, being met by her relatives," explained Zoe. "She's not a big shot. She's just her husband's favourite wife." "Some people are lucky," said Tricia with a slight envy. When Tricia saw the nurse coming out with the baby, she rushed to her and gently took Leslie in her arms. "Here is our happiness," whispered Tricia, cradling the baby in her arms. Tricia went quickly to the exit. Zoe, with a heavy bag, could barely keep up with her. "Let me help you," smiled a guy standing at the entrance with a bouquet and balloons. He was probably one of Holly's relatives. "No need, there's our car." Zoe waved him away and then looked up at the man. Suddenly she froze, unable to move. Ben was standing in front of her. "You?" she asked quietly. Ben was confused by the unexpected meeting, but quickly pulled himself together. "Do you need help? If not, I'll go. My sister will be out soon." "No, I don't need help." Zoe lowered her head and slowly walked down the steps. She was so confused that she was at a loss for words and couldn't soberly assess the situation. She wanted to throw herself into his arms, to tell him that he had recently become a father, but Ben's gaze was distant and cold. He looked at her with contempt. "Sorry, I forgot to congratulate you," Ben shouted after her. She said nothing. Feeling uneasy, she quickly walked to the car, where her friend and her daughter were waiting for her. Zoe felt like she was doing something wrong again, making another mistake, but she didn't know how to act differently in this situation. "What's wrong with you?" Tricia asked, looking in the mirror at Zoe. "Let's go, I'm fine," answered Zoe. She tried to appear calm, but the unexpected encounter with Ben was unsettling. His contemptuous gaze was still in her mind. Only low traitors are looked at that way. Holding Leslie close to her, Zoe tried to put Ben out of her mind, realizing that they would never be together again. After her actions, he would not believe that Leslie was his daughter, and she didn't want to run after him and prove his paternity because, in reality, they were practically strangers. "Are you upset with your roommate?" suggested Tricia at home. "No, that's not the reason. I saw him," Zoe said melancholically. "Who?" Tricia's eyes widened, not realizing what was going on with her friend. "I saw Ben, Leslie's father," Zoe admitted. "He was one of Holly's many guests, standing at the entrance of the maternity hospital with flowers." "So what? Why didn't you tell him about Leslie?" Tricia was indignant. "He looked at me coldly, and then he congratulated me on the birth of the baby with such disdain. You should have seen the look on his face at that moment." "What have you done? Why didn't you tell him everything?" "How do you imagine it? Get down on the ground. It's only in Brazilian soap operas that it's like that. Unfortunately, we are in the harsh reality of our lives, not in a romantic melodrama. He doesn't know me. He only knows that I'm a frivolous woman and a cheater. All I have to do is forget about him." Miracles don't happen. You say he's a buddy of your roommate at the maternity hospital? Tricia clarified, ignoring her friend's words. Yes, he said he was waiting for his sister. Do you have contacts of Holly? Tricia inquired. I gave her our business card. She's supposed to come to our salon. She wants to change her image and I don't have her number. Wait, why do you need it? No reason, I was just asking. Forget it. You're at a new stage in your life now. You shouldn't be bitter about men. You should be excited about having a baby and dealing with it. You're right, Zoe smiled. She's so defenseless, and I want to carry her in my arms all the time, to warm her with my warmth. You shouldn't do that, Tricia laughed. Do not accustom the baby to your hands. Soon, the worries about her daughter, lack of sleep, and fatigue pushed the thoughts of Ben out of Zoe's head. It was not easy for the woman because she had to deal with work as well. Tricia didn't know much about accounting. Hello, we're on Zoe's recommendation. She owns this salon. The pleasant blonde smiled. Tricia almost choked on her coffee. She realized that the woman she had been waiting for almost 2 months had come. Come in, please, Tricia invited. You must be Holly, Zoe's roommate. Yes, Zoe left me her business card. She was very complimentary about your salon. I thought I'd drag my husband here too. Emil just needs a haircut, and I need the whole range of services. Great, says Tricia. Let me take you to another room. The girls will take care of you, and I'll give your husband a haircut. Thank you, said the woman, with an arrogant look at Tricia. Tricia realized that she was unlikely to have a conversation with this lady. There was only one hope, that Holly's husband did not suffer from delusions of grandeur, unlike his wife. Maybe a cup of coffee or tea? Your wife won't be free soon, Tricia asked Emil. I wouldn't say no to coffee, the man smiled. It's been raining since morning and I'm very reactive to this kind of weather. I wanted to lie at home in peace. It's my day off, but my wife had a firm intention to go to the beauty parlour. Tricia placed a cup of flavoured drinks and candy on the coffee table. She was very nervous about starting this conversation, but realised it needed to be done now or never. Emil, my best friend was in the maternity ward with your wife. They were discharged on the same day. I saw how excitedly you welcomed your daughter and spouse. The woman smiled. That's right. I was so happy about the birth of my daughter that I was willing to move mountains, Emil confessed. The thing is, there was a man among your guests. Ben, if I'm not mistaken. He's a relative of your wife's? Yes, he is. Ben is Holly's sister. He's rarely home, but I managed to reach him on the phone. He works as a captain on a cruise ship. Why do you ask? Emil regained his composure. The fact is that my friend and your relative are old friends. They saw each other that day outside the maternity hospital. Ben gave her his phone number, but she, being forgetful, lost it. My friend was very upset about it. Tricia lied, hoping her plan would work. Well, no problem, Emil said, taking out his cell phone. Write down his number and give it to your friend. Thank you so much. She will be thrilled, the woman exclaimed, almost jumping up and down. Tricia knew that she hadn't acted good. The woman had one principle in life. She never lied to anyone. But for the sake of the best friend's happiness, it was acceptable to deviate from her rules. After all, who else but her would help Zoe? Dialing Ben's phone number, Tricia clenched her fists, silently praying for her plan to work. She knew that the man probably wouldn't even listen to her and would simply hang up. Hello, I need to speak with Ben, Tricia said uncertainly when the man picked up the phone. It's me. What can I do for you? I'm Zoe's friend. Do you remember her? Recently you saw her at the entrance to the maternity ward. And? The man interrupted her irritably. I'm probably going to seem crazy to you right now, but I think you have the right to know the truth. The fact is, you're the father of Zoe's daughter. Are you out of your mind? Ben asked in bewilderment. I've only seen your friend once, not counting that meeting at the maternity hospital. What are you even counting on? Do you want to make money off me? It's not going to work. I'm not as simple-minded as you and your darling friend think I am." "Well, I've put you on notice. Goodbye," Tricia said angrily, hanging up the phone. The woman was upset. She of course realized that Ben was unlikely to start jumping with delight at what he had heard, but she didn't think that he would take it like this. But after all, she didn't know what he was like. "Well, okay, at least I tried." The woman cheered herself up. Early in the morning, Tricia was awakened by a phone call. She did not realize that Ben was calling. "Hello, I'll be passing through your city tomorrow. Where can I find Zoe?" the man asked sullenly. "You can stop by our salon and we'll talk there. After yesterday's conversation, I'm not sure that you should meet my friend," Tricia replied rudely. "Did you decide to mess with my head? Why did you call me if you don't want me to see her?" "We'll talk when we meet." Tricia dictated the address and hurriedly hung up when she saw Zoe at the door. "Who's calling you so early?" wondered the sleepy woman. "It's not even 6 in the morning." "A client, she needs her hair done urgently," Tricia lied. She was already beginning to doubt the correctness of her decision because she hadn't expected Ben to be so skeptical about the news of the baby. She didn't want Zoe to get hurt in this situation because she was already having a hard time. Ben arrived the next day. Tricia didn't show much ceremony with him, speaking dryly and without any emotion. "As you can see, my friend and I are doing well, and we don't need anyone's handouts. Zoe loves you. She didn't come to you that day, but she had a serious reason for not coming. During the pregnancy, she was able to pull herself together and set herself up to never see you again. But that recent encounter brought back memories of you. I can see her sneaking tears sometimes. I realize you have doubts about your daughter. I can assure you 100% that Leslie is your daughter. I can see now that you and she are very much alike. I apologize if I offended you yesterday. I don't hear such news every day. At first I wanted to ignore your words, but they kept me awake at night and focused during the day. So I decided to find out the truth. Can I see Zoe? Perhaps we need to explain ourselves," Ben said calmly. "Yes, that's why I tracked you down." Zoe put Leslie down and went to the window. She had been dreaming about Ben again tonight. She didn't know how long it would last or when she could get him out of her heart and head. A quiet knock on the door brought her out of her sad thoughts. Covering the door to the room where the baby slept, she hurried to open the front door. When she saw Ben on the threshold, she turned pale and rubbed her eyes. For a moment she thought she was going crazy with love. "Hi," the man smiled. "Shh, the baby just fell asleep." "May I come in?" he asked in a whisper. Zoe stepped back from the door, letting the man into the apartment. Surprised and confused, she fell into a daze. Recently she had been thinking about him, realizing that it was unlikely she would ever see him again. And now he stood before her, so close yet so distant. "How did you find me?" Zoe asked, completely bewildered. "Never mind. Would you kindly explain what's going on? I was told you had a daughter. My daughter. Is this true?" "True. I have no claim on you, and having a child doesn't obligate you to anything. I had a daughter for myself. It was my decision." At that moment, a child's crying could be heard from the room. Leaving the man in the kitchen, Zoe hurried to the child. He quietly followed her in. "Your friend spoke the truth." Ben smiled, examining his daughter carefully. The girl unconsciously smiled at the man, as if happy to see her daddy. "She's smiling at me," Ben marveled. "Does she really understand or feel something at that age?" "Of course she does," laughed the woman. "They already understand and feel everything in the womb. Do you want to hold her?" "Yes." Ben took his daughter in his arms, feeling a sense of ownership. When he noticed a small birthmark on Leslie's neck, he involuntarily smiled. "I have the same," he said, only a little bigger." "I know," Zoe said, lowering her eyes. "I've tried to forget that meeting we had as best I could, but Leslie reminds me of you 24 hours a day." "Zoe, tell me, why did you change your mind about coming with me? After all, I waited for you until morning, hoping you would come." Zoe realized it was time for her to explain herself to Ben. She loved this man and didn't want to hide anything from him. She wanted to tell him the truth. She recounted everything as it had happened. She told him about her ex-spouse, his alcohol addiction, and how she couldn't bring herself to leave him that night. "At that moment, I didn't even think about the fact that I didn't have your phone number, and when I tried to find you, I realized I knew nothing about you except your name. A month later, I found out I was pregnant and immediately decided to leave my husband. This child opened my eyes to many things and made me realize that I was living my life wrong and that it was time to make some drastic changes." "Why didn't you explain everything at the maternity hospital?" Ben asked. "You would have seen the look on your face. I thought you were going to annihilate me with that intense stare of yours." "How was I supposed to look? What was I supposed to think? I thought you were happy with another man, and besides, how did Trisha find me?" "I have no idea," Zoe confessed honestly. "She didn't tell me anything. That schemer." "Will you come with me?" Ben suddenly asked. "What do you mean?" Zoe didn't quite understand his proposal. "I'm proposing that you come and live with me. Ever since we met, I haven't been able to settle down. At first I thought I would quickly forget about you, but then I realized that I might actually be in love. This was the first time something like this had ever happened to me." Ben walked over to Zoe, put his arm around her shoulders, and pulled her close. At that moment, they both felt like the happiest people on earth. Zoe wanted to answer yes, but the fear of the unknown held her back. Plus, she would be abandoning Trisha by leaving her alone. After all, her friend couldn't handle their joint business alone, and Trisha was the only person who helped and supported her in any situation. "All this is very unexpected. It's not easy to drop everything and leave. Let's not rush things, especially since Leslie is too young to travel like this." "So you're suggesting we wait until our daughter grows up? And when are we going to live?" Ben blurted it out with reproach. Zoe remained silent. Ben wanted her to leave everything and go with him to the ends of the earth, but now her mind wouldn't allow her to make such a rash decision. She wanted to get to know him better and understand what kind of man he was. After all, love alone wasn't enough to make such an important decision and tie her life to his. She wasn't alone now, and she had to think about her daughter's well-being first. "I won't pressure you," Ben said, sounding resentful. "I'll be in here 3 more days. You have time to think things through and weigh your options." Ben kissed the sleeping Leslie in his arms, gently placed her in the crib, and silently made his way towards the exit. Zoe also remained silent, unsure of what else she could say in her defense. Perhaps he was right. She needed to think things through before making such an important decision. As soon as Trisha entered the apartment, Zoe immediately confronted her with accusations. "What a loyal friend I have! You should at least have warned me that he was coming. Why all the secrets? I thought we were close, and that there couldn't be any secrets between us." "I'm sorry," Trisha frowned. "I wanted to tell you about my plan, but then I was afraid you would forbid me from looking for Leslie's father. I only wanted what was best for you and your daughter. Did he hurt you?" "No." Zoe shared the entire conversation with her friend, feeling completely confused about her life and relationships. She didn't know what to do in the current situation. She loved Ben, but she wasn't ready to leave everything behind and chase after him with a child in her arms. "I think he's rushing things too fast," Trisha said. "Love is love, but you need to take time to get to know each other. You should calm down and talk things through together. Tomorrow is my day off. Don't worry about Leslie. I'll be happy to babysit her. Zoe didn't argue with her friend and called Ben to arrange a meeting. Deep down she realised that she didn't want to lose him anymore. After all, he was also human and unlikely to wait for her forever. "Hello," Ben smiled, holding out a bouquet of white lilies to her. "Wow, how did you know these were my favourite flowers?" Zoe smiled. "Trisha again?" "No, you told me yourself. Remember, we talked about why all women prefer roses." "Oh, yes, I remember," Zoe replied, surprised that he had recalled their conversations, even though it had been over a year since they first met. "I was up again this night, thinking about you and about my daughter. You know, being a father feels so strange. A sense of responsibility immediately kicked in. I understand your fear of taking this big step, but I promise you that I will never hurt you. Zoe, you won't regret coming with me. Please understand that I have a responsible position, and it is not so easy for me to leave everything and go to you. I have a stable life, a spacious apartment, a summer house, and there is no mistress of all this." Ben took Zoe's hand and carefully placed a ring on her finger, which he had been holding all this time. "Thank you," whispered Zoe. "I will go with you." In the evening, Ben had an unpleasant conversation with his sister Holly. He wanted to share his joy and happiness with her, telling her that her daughter and niece were born on the same day and were in the same ward. "Are you talking about Zoe now?" Holly guessed. "Wow, would you have thought? Wait, what makes you think the baby is yours?" "Ben, you're not stupid. Are you out of your mind? This woman has a husband, and he's the one she claims gave birth to her daughter." "That's enough," Ben interrupted his sister. "You can gossip among yourselves. I know that Leslie is my daughter." "You're out of your mind. She bragged to everyone in the maternity hospital that her husband is the father," Holly shouted. "I will never accept her into our family. She's so deceitful." "And you don't have to accept her," Ben retorted. "It's enough that I have accepted her into my heart and into my life." "You need to establish paternity first," Holly insisted. "No, let your husband establish paternity. I am sure about my woman." Ben shouted and put on his jacket. He left his sister's apartment, slamming the door loudly. A year had passed, and Zoe had long ago settled into her new place. Ben was right. She had never regretted believing his words. The man showered his family with a love and care she had never dared to dream of. "I'm home. How are you managing without me?" Zoe heard her husband's voice in the hallway and rushed to him. "Hello," the woman rejoiced. "Leslie and I always feel incomplete without you. You know that." "I miss you so much too. But what can I do? Work. What's new with us?" the man asked. "Trisha called, and just imagine, she invited us to her wedding, and she's very happy and 3 months pregnant. It's all so strange," Zoe said, feeling at a loss. "Darling, well, what's so strange about a young woman expecting a child and getting married?" laughed her spouse. "No, I refuse to understand women's logic." "The fact is that she was diagnosed with infertility a long time ago. How is that possible? Trisha had no hope of becoming a mother. Everything happened the way God wanted it to happen. I'm more inclined to trust him than doctors. So when's the wedding? I need to know beforehand." "The day after tomorrow," Zoe said. "Yes, your friend is really a master of surprises," the man laughed. Zoe didn't even realize that the most important surprise was ahead of them. Trisha met them at the airport. Zoe noticed from afar a stately man in an expensive business suit who was standing next to Trisha. Mentally happy for her friend, she hurried to meet her. But getting closer, Zoe stopped, speechless. Trisha's companion was her ex-husband, Tony. The man had transformed beyond recognition, becoming a respectable man. Looking at him, it was difficult to believe that he had been drunk for months, walking dirty and ragged. "Meet my fiancé, Tony," Tricia said solemnly. "I didn't say meet accidentally. It's not Tony, whom you've known for years. Now he is an entirely different person. Now he is not a loser, but the top manager of a chain of beauty salons and, at the same time, my life partner. That's it." "Great," smiled Zoe. "I'm surprised, but I'm truly happy for you both." In the evening, Zoe interrogated Tricia. She knew that her friend couldn't stand alcoholics and avoided communicating with them in every possible way. So Zoe really couldn't understand what had bound Tricia to Tony. "Tricia, just no offense, but were you always in love with Tony? You just didn't want to admit it to me," Zoe asked. "No," smiled Tricia. 6 months ago, I found him in my driveway. The frost was fierce then, and he was lying on the bench. I could barely rouse him, and when he woke up he kept mumbling, repeating your name. I felt sorry for him. I dragged him home and put him to bed. In the morning we had a long talk. In general, I offered Tony a job, and over time I realized that he was a wonderful man, but there was no one to guide him. And after a couple of months we realized that we loved each other. I hope you're not judging me." "Oh, come on." Zoe hugged her friend, resting her head on her shoulder. "I'm delighted for you. Do you think my soul didn't ache because of him? I thought about him every day, worried that he'd get drunk and disappear. I was also thinking about you, realizing how hard it is for you to be alone. And now I'm happy that everything in my life, and yours, has gotten better. You're doing great. For the first time, I saw a sparkle in Tony's eyes. And in yours too." The two women talked for a long time, glad that things had worked out as well as they could.